When looking for the king of podcasts, you're at the wrong channel.
Well, excuse me!
Looking for good ideas for life? You're far from good hands.
Hey, bud, what's your problem?
If you think the listener is always right, you're far from the right place.
Out of order! Even in the future, nothing works!
Hosted by a Northeasterner by birth, but a rebel by choice.
Are you threatening me?
If you want a host that floats between love and madness,
and we know the night is always gonna be here anyway. Thinking of you's working up my appetite, looking forward to a little afternoon delight.
then play on and listen to Crazy Train Radio.
All right, guys, listen to this blues riff and B. Watch me for the changes and try and keep up, okay?
Within the gaming world, there are your general gamers, but then there are those that enjoy the dark underbelly of gaming. If you're one of those that enjoy the dark underbelly of gaming, we certainly got the place to send you. Scorpion Lair Games. That's right, Scorpion Lair Games is the creators of the true crime hit Killers, the card game. Let's not forget they also have Killers Clothing Company, the profiler game, and things like the 5-Minute Murder channel on YouTube. And we certainly can't forget the new book that is certainly a hit, beyond the headliners, True Crimes, Myths, and Legends. Make sure you visit Jeff and the Scorpion Lair Games on Facebook and everywhere today.
Hi, this is Angelo Cataldi. You may remember me from WIP. I was a sports talker for 33 years at that radio station. Well, now I get to go on Crazy Train Radio. You don't want to miss it. It's this week, right here.
Hey folks, it's your least favorite host in the podcast world, Croc, Jonathan Steele. And boy, do we have a good one for you today.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, this next guest waited until he was 72 to write his first book, but certainly well worth the wait. The book is called Loud, and it is a story of his hilarious, controversial 33 years as the maestro of the mania in Philadelphia sports and Philadelphia sports radio. He has done so much, as he was a finalist for a Pulitzer Prize in 1986, graduated from Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism, and he has done so much more in his career. So, like we said, Loud, how a shy nerd.
Cover. Those
Yes,
are
hardcover.
Those are
Yeah.
top.
Yeah, because it's been a sellout. You know, how a shy nerd came to Philadelphia and turned up the volume in the most passionate sports city of America. You know, and before we get diving into it, this guest, Angelo Cataldi, the author of the book, did you ever think going into Columbia to study journalism that at the other side of things, you would actually put out a book talking about your career?
The truth is, Jonathan, if they knew that I was going to make the turn I did in my career, they wouldn't have allowed me at Columbia. They didn't want people doing shock jock radio coming from that great journalism school. It was a great school. It was a year that completely changed the way I saw things and changed the direction of my career. But then I got to a point, and I went, maybe I should take the money for a little while. And that's what got me out of that's kind of what got me out of the journalism game and got me into doing radio. It was like really crazy that way. But no regrets. I'm really happy with the book. The book did really well. It's been out for a year now, and it's still selling really great as another holiday season hit us. It's great.
Yeah, I got your money.
It's funny, and we were joking about Columbia there and everything else. You've told a story publicly that they kind of, I guess it was somebody from the office or whatever helping you come in. You don't want to do sports. We do serious journalists here. We do, from political to this to that and all that stuff. Since then, are you aware of anyone going the sports route coming out of Columbia?
100%. I made a call. He would have gotten in anyway, I'm sure. Mike Sealski, who is a great columnist in Philadelphia now, went to Columbia University. Wow, it had to be maybe 20 years after I did, and never hid his thoughts about going into sports. Somebody told me that there is actually now a course on sports writing in the journalism school. So it has evolved over so many years. But when I went there, that was a place to go who was going to be running a newspaper or a syndicated columnist, or better yet, a foreign correspondent in some faraway country, reporting from, war, right on the front of a war, that kind of thing. So me going, I would like to cover guys playing games with a ball. That was like, I don't think that's really what we do here. So they told me, don't say anything. And then they told me something that changed my life. And it was, if you're really going to do that, do it the right way. Don't kiss every player's butt, and don't constantly kowtow to the teams the way so many sports people do. And sports was always called a toy department. Well, I didn't fully grasp all this until I actually wrote the book. And I went, that's where that attitude came from. That made me so, I was cynical. I didn't believe most of what people would say. I would have to re-ask the question and test it out. And those are the kind of things that I learned at Columbia. And I'm sure, I'm not any list of people, famous graduates who went there. I'm like on a list of ignore this guy if you can, because he went to the dark side. But the truth is now it's seen differently than it was when I was there in 1976, 1977. It's a lot different now, the whole perspective.
From a business standpoint, because obviously you did some writing for newspapers and such, and then went to radio in, what was it, 88 with Al Morgani, and started working with Tom Brookshire part-time, I think, at first, then became a full-time gig. Sports radio wasn't what it is today, obviously, back then. But what would you say is the biggest change in sports radio, from then to where we're at in 2024 here?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's profound. When I did it, and you're right, the format started in 88. FAN did it. WIP went to it maybe a month or two later. No one did it. You understand? There were no experienced people doing sports broadcasting where you were presenting strong opinions and arguing on the air. There wasn't much of that. There was you'd have a drive time. Howard Eskin was doing it in Philadelphia. Steve Fredericks was doing it here some. But there weren't enough people to fill all the hours in a 24-hour sports radio. On their schedule, there weren't enough people to do it. So what ended up happening was they started to go, well, who knows sports? And then we'll train them how to do it on the radio. And that's how Berkshire hired Al and me. And that's how we got the opportunity to do it. Now, in 2024, everyone is a sports broadcaster. Anyone who wants to do it can start a podcast and do it. And frankly, get very good at it by doing it that way. We went in totally inexperienced, and I guarantee you, if you heard how we did our show in 1988, 89, even the first couple of years I was with Brookie, you would say to yourself, God, there are tons of podcasts that are better at this than that guy. Well, how did he do that? And the fact is, I got a break. There wasn't anybody else doing it. We were all learning together, so we got to learn on the job. But now, oh my God, if you want to talk sports now, do what you did, Jonathan, and just start a podcast. And if you're good at it, more and more people will listen to it. And if you can promote it well, you'll have a chance to do it. And there was none of that then. Nobody did it then.
And I'll say this too. I was fortunate try this in English. I'm just learning that as a second language after 40 years.
Say it!
But I got to learn the old school style. I went to Rowan and I remember things such as carts.
Oh, yeah.
Not everything being digital.
Yeah.
In the radio field and entertainment production and all. So I remember the old school, was trained the old school, and learned when I started this in 2012. Obviously, it's test and feel and all that stuff. And I know you know the man as well. I know you said this, but he always said, always have an opinion. People will agree, people will disagree with it. But I blame that comment on Tony Bruno.
Let me tell you, Tony Bruno had a massive effect on all of us. Because when he joined our show in 1992, these carts you were talking about, 8-track cartridges that you would place into a little machine. You could play sound bites from it. You could play sound effects. Tony did a lot of that for us in the early days because Tony knew radio. You understand? Mm-hmm. Tony was the only one in the building when we were broadcasting who actually knew what he was doing. So in those early days, Al and I copied him. And one of the very first lessons, the man who preferred to be called Mr. Monday Night, right? Because he always made predictions on Monday Night Football. He always would always say, look, if you're going to express an opinion, express it, really put it out there, and don't be afraid to get a little theatrical about it. You know, chants and echoes and all this, all the sounds and craziness that we never thought like radio people. Tony got us to start thinking like that and say, this is not a journalistic enterprise. This is a show. This is a performance. So take your opinion. Make sure you feel that way. Because if you don't, I wasn't a good enough actor to be able to pull off something I didn't believe. But don't be afraid to amplify it, throw a few bells and whistles in there, and make it fun, make it entertaining. And you just a minute ago were talking about your second language, all that. Let me just say, that's when somebody is doing that on any broadcast, podcast, radio, or anything. That's the lost art. That's the hard part. The humor. The humor is the hardest thing to get. And let me tell you something. The humor is going to pay more bills than all the other stuff combined. You got to be able to entertain people. And if you've got that ability, you're 3/4 of the way there.
And like you said there, and I've learned it along the way, and I do it here as well. You sprinkle in a little sound here, or you put a drop here, you put this, to put the soup together to be entertaining. And you know what's funny with the humor, and you would notice just as well as I have, even though we are of different age brackets, but the PC culture of things and maybe giving your opinion, or even if you're talking fact based on information, when you present it, it's like the backlash you may catch for, why you shouldn't have said it that way. Why didn't you say it this way? It's like, hey, here's it. And I go with the old George Carlin line. If you don't like what I have to say, or the opinion, or whatever the guest says, whatever the thing is, however you want to look at it, they got this little thing called a remote or a digital thing where you can change the channel.
Yeah, right. Right. Well, let me just say, first of all, if I said that, change the channel, I would get called in after the show by my bosses and say, please do not advocate that. Somebody may take that sound clip and make it a bigger thing than what you said. So don't do that. But that was the problem in the last 10 years of my career on the radio, was watching everything, because there's stuff I said in the first 10 years that absolutely would have gotten me fired in the last 10 years. I was there 33 years. So it was a process of evolving. But we did in our time, and I'm not proud of it, but it's what was acceptable in 1995. We did ethnic humor. We laughed at ourselves. I did Italian jokes all the time. And we laughed at all ethnic groups. We used stereotypes, which wasn't great, but back then was way more accepted. Then you just reached a point where we had a caller named Kim the Lesbian who called in to represent the lesbian perspective on sports for years. I don't even think you could have somebody do that now without going, well, no, you're pigeonholing me. That's like, she's more than just that. Why you just calling her that? That's how things evolve. And I'll be honest with you, by the end, I wasn't sure where the line was anymore. I didn't know for sure. A show would end, and sometimes I would go, wow, I was on a limb on that one. I hope that doesn't blow up on me. And there's all that second guessing. I got away with stuff right to the end, though, because I had done it for so long. If I was starting out now, saying the stuff I said the last year I was on the air 2 years ago, I would be in trouble. But you get grandfathered because you're there. So, oh yeah, he's been saying that crap for years. Don't worry about it. But it's different and it's scary. It always scared me because I always knew I was capable of saying something that would bury me. And that's why the last day when I got
Welcome to the club.
I said, yeah, but when I got to the last day, I went, God, I survived. I can't believe it. I survived. And people are saying, why don't you go back part-time and do something like that? And I went, no, I'm not going to test that any further. I'm a complete dinosaur now in that business. I'll just stay in my lane now and enjoy retirement. But it's scary. It's way different. It's easier to get on the air now because of podcasts, but it's harder to stay on the air because there's everybody out there monitoring you to see if you're going to go over that line. And if you do, it'll become viral and you might become extinct.
Well, speaking of retirement, and I know from reading the book and listening to other things that you've done talking about it, the transition was great at first because you jumped right into writing the book. But then it was, once everything was done with the book, you're going, now what the hell am I going to do? Like, you're like, because you were used to something for so long. And I love how David was teasing you, not teasing you, but, hey, can we get one more year out of you? Can we do, and you go into that and stuff. You talk about doing the, what do you call it, therapy and stuff, for a while there.
Yeah.
How are you feeling at this point with where you're at?
So much better. It was, I knew, because that job wasn't just a job to me. That was a big part of my identity. And when it was suddenly over, I did manage to milk a couple of more months out of it when I wrote this book, but I was on a tight deadline for that. Now that's over, and I'm waiting for the editing process, and I'm looking around going, okay, now what do I do here? And so I went into therapy with the sports psychologist who is a part of our show, Dr. Joe Fish. And it was a remarkable experience to do it, because I did it for the better part of the next year, once a week or so. And he was the perfect guy to do it, because he counseled athletes at the end of their careers. And athletes' careers are over most of the time, somewhere in their 30s, late 30s, mid 30s, depends who they are. And then their whole identity has been, from the time they're in high school, they're the athletes, they're the big guy on campus, the whole deal. And then it's over. You can't run as fast, you can't jump as high. Your career as an athlete is over. Now what? And he was great at showing me how you develop a new focus. And he did it with two simple things that I use to this day. Number one is understand that life comes in cycles, good and bad. Start to train yourself to say, this too shall pass, when you're in a bad period, and it'll get you through it. And the second thing, Jonathan, was the best piece of advice I've ever had. He said, you're retired, you're 70, you're 73 now. Put away the scoreboard. The game is over. You won. You got to the end. You had a successful career. Now spend every day focused on just doing what you enjoy. And over the course of these 2 years, what I have focused most on, which I should have done long before, was my family, my grandkids, and I get to spend a lot more time with them now. And I find that far more rewarding than anything I ever did in my career, either as a newspaper guy or a radio guy. So it took me way too long to figure it out. But once I got that, I feel tremendously better about being retired.
And it's funny. I've had conversations over a beer or a shot of whiskey with some former athletes and all that, or professional wrestlers or entertainers or whatever the case is, where when you're at the peak of your career, you come in and out of the house, you know what I mean? Depending on what you're doing and all that stuff. But then you hit that retirement point and you're home most of the time. And so it's a transition, they would say, no matter what they did. Like you said, from you retiring from what you did, how was the transition for your wife, your kids, your grandkids, that, hey, he's here all the time now?
Yeah. Well, my wife is amazingly flexible on stuff like that. And she's so different than me in that she's very social, and she's not in the house all that much. She's always running around doing something. And so we have our own lanes, and that has been fine. The little ones, the real little ones, because I have 3 grandkids who live like a couple of blocks from me, who are 6, 4, and 2. And the 2-year-old, little Dutchie, right? Little Dutchie has only known me as retired Chooch. They call me Chooch. And here's the thing. Like, I can't believe how close we are, because I'm with him all the time. And I'm playing with him, and he just assumes, well, this guy is just there to play with me. Whenever he comes over, oh, look who's here. Now we play. That kind of stuff. And that's a whole new experience. I didn't even get to spend nearly that much time with my own kids many years ago. And I wish I could do a do-over, because they deserved as much time as I'm giving Dutchie now, as just somebody who, kind of sits for him when my wife is not there, and she's still doing 90% of that anyway. I'm just playing. She's doing all that heavy lifting. But it's an adjustment. It's a great question, because people always go, well, you're retired, you got to adjust. Everyone around you has to adjust, because the whole circumstance is different. And they did a much better job of it than I did. It took me forever. And my wife seemed like she could handle it effortlessly. She said, you were on the air 4 hours. You were home most of the day anyway. When you weren't. The difference is I wasn't present. I was working on the next show. I was working on, I got to find out what this guy said. I'm always trying to plan the show in my mind. Now I'm present, because I don't do that anymore, although I still follow all of it. I still follow it all just out of a force of habit and because I love sports and have my whole life. So that part, it's still a big hobby for me, but that's all it is.
And that's a good thing you brought up about the preparation because people don't realize to have something, even have something halfway decent, you got to put so many hours into it. And it was funny because this week has been back to back, episodes I'm taping to get through, the holidays and all that stuff. And I was somebody called me, "Hey, what are you doing?" "I'm watching a documentary for one topic, but I'm reading something for, I'm doing two at one for prep and stuff." So people, I know everybody I talk to that know you, they said Angela's prep was just next level. So there's so much respect on that end too. Then you had somebody else right by your side too when you were doing the morning show, in Rhea Hughes, who had the same and has the same work ethic. So,
Yes.
what is it about Rhea that makes her so special?
Well, she was born with this same thing that I have, which is a desire to over prepare. My case, it was insecurity. All right. I didn't do that kind of thing when I was a newspaper person because that's what I was trained to do. I went to school for it. I got the experience. I had a conventional career at that point, making my way up the ladder, going to bigger papers, that kind of stuff. When I got to radio and didn't know anything, but was on in a major city for 4 hours every day, I didn't think I could do it. I had a fear that I couldn't. And in those early days, there would be days by the second or third hour of that show where you realize, man, I'm running out here. How am I going to get through to the end of the show? And so I learned then, prepare for way more. So I had a formula. Like it usually took 2 hours of prep for every hour I was on the air every single day. So it's a 12-hour day if you did it right, because I was on for 4 and I was prepping for 8. Some of that prep is watching game. It's not grueling prep. You're not in a coal mine, but you're constantly in pursuit of the next fresh angle or the next interesting thing that you can entertain your audience with. And it's a preoccupation. The longer you do it, the more part of your life it is. And you put other things aside. You ignore other stuff to make sure that when that light's on air, that you know what to say. And that most of it was out of insecurity. In Rhea's case, she is just the type A of all type A's. And she works so hard. And at the end, and the reason I knew I was near the end was I couldn't come up with names anymore. Things just weren't coming out as quickly. My brain was slowing down. And in the last few years, right after the pandemic to when I ended it in February of 2022, we had like a sign language, and I would look at her like, I can't come up with this name. And she would, every time, snap in and jump in with the name. And all it took was a glance. And she would come with me before the show and tell me what she thought were the most important issues to hit that day. And more times than not, she was hitting stuff I wasn't picking up so quickly. She was amazing. She prolonged my career 3 years, maybe longer. I don't know. She was, and that's it. That's a great lesson for anybody out there doing this. Make sure you're working with people who have the kind of commitment to it that it requires to be really good at it, to be successful at it.
And it's exact same thing. I know what you're talking about when you're looking at people and stuff, and you have a working relationship because you guys worked together for so long. Rhea, yourself, Al, and you had John come in, you had Cindy come in. You had this core group. Because I have, depending on the topic and time of the day I tape, have co-hosts and stuff. But it's people I can look at, like you said. I'm brain farting on something here. Help me. I could just give them that look, or they know. They say, "Oh, we're talking about this, that, whatever the thing is." Yeah, who? There's one gentleman that took it a different aspect. I don't know if it was because he was overnight or what the case was, but I always appreciate it Big Daddy Graham. And I know you got to be friends with him for so many years. What made Big Daddy so special?
It was such a privilege that I got to spend so much time with him because his show came up to our show. He worked from 2 to 6, 2 to 5:30, and then we would start. And so what a character he was, my God. He would come down, and it was lonely in there. From 2:00, everyone's gone. Now I'm showing up about 3:45, and he's lonely. He's got just his producer. So he'd go to a break and he'd come down the hall. And there's nobody in the world I ever knew who was a better storyteller than Big Daddy Graham. He was a professional, highly successful stand-up comedian. And he would come down and he would start telling me some story. And my God, he had so many stories. Frank Sinatra, he had everything. He was all over the country performing and stuff like that. And then his producer would yell out, "Big Daddy, 30 seconds." And he'd yell back down, put in another spot. I didn't finish my story yet. For me. He was such a great guy, so fun and so serious about it. Yeah, I just gave you my formula for working when people are awake. Can you imagine how much harder that job is when 95% of the people are sleeping or 90% are sleeping, and you still got to come up with entertaining stuff every day? And it was his show. I've always said this, greatest overnight show in Philadelphia radio history. Not even close. It was so great. And the other part of it was not enough people heard it for them to realize that he was a superstar, that he could have done any day part and been great in. And toward the end there, I started convincing the management to use him as my replacement when I was on vacation and stuff. And he hit it out of the park. He was funny. He cared about people. He was beyond eccentric. He would come in your house and go through your cupboards looking for cookies before he said hello. But when he arrived, everybody's life got a little more fun. And I cannot tell you the great loss it was when he passed away way too young at 68 years old, because that man was one of the true greats I met and got to appreciate in my life.
It's funny. Obviously, I was aware of the story growing up in this area. And there's the famous story of you guys going to the draft and all that. But when I was reading through the book, I didn't realize that. And I know the 30-30 people, you can look it up or read it in the book. I'll leave it at that. But I didn't realize that you had a homeless guy to make it the 30-30. How much of a bargaining chip did you have to give to that guy to say, all right, hey, this is what we're doing?
One thing I could tell you. So we get the mayor of the city back then, Ed Rendell, gets us 30 tickets to go to the NFL draft in 1999 to cheer when the Eagles pick with the second pick, Ricky Williams, the running back. And the mayor loved him, and he became governor, so he did pretty well for himself. But he got us the tickets. We recruit 30 people. I wanted to get the craziest people. We get a bus. The lawyers at WIP say you can't put alcohol on the bus, but that didn't stop these guys from sneaking it on. They got a lot on.
They took the bar! The whole fucking bar!
We do a head count at the end, and it's 29. And I went, listen, 29, that's 30, 29 doesn't work. We needed 30. And there was a homeless guy there. And one of the, I don't remember which one of us, went up to him and said, you want to take a ride to New York with us in this bus? We got tons of food and soft drinks, although I have a feeling that he got some of the stash from the other guys too. And
maybe.
Come with us. Jonathan, I don't even remember if he actually came in for the draft into the Felt Forum at Madison Square Garden when they suddenly announced that Donovan McNabb was the pick, and we all went, what? And then everybody booed.
Boo, you suck.
Here's how sustaining that moment is. And I could kid myself and say there are a lot of other moments in a 33-year career. That's the moment that I will be remembered for. And it's not a moment of great glory by any means. I was literally 2 months ago, I took a train to New York City. I then got a driver to take me to Brooklyn to do a 2-hour interview for a special on Vice TV, The Grudge it's called, about Donovan McNabb and his relationship with Terrell Owens. And they contacted me because I am the poster boy for booing McNabb 25 years ago. It's still there all these years later. And the fact of the matter is, you know, McNabb hated it. It exposed that he was too sensitive to really fully embrace what Philadelphia brings to an athlete's career. And that's why he never won here. And that's why all these years later, he's still kicking and screaming and, you know, holding grudges and doing stuff like that. That's not the formula for success if you're an athlete in Philadelphia.
So it's your fault that he got nervous and threw up in the Super Bowl then, right?
See, he did throw up in the, by the way, of this 2+ hours I did of this interview, an hour is just that. Did he throw up? Did he not throw up? And I said to him, listen, he threw up. I'm positive he threw up. 3 players who were there on the field, 2 in the huddle, saw him throw up. That's proof he threw up. He tried to hide from it, but he threw up. It's a great player, the best Eagle quarterback we've ever seen. Although someday I think Hurts might go beyond him. But what I will tell you is that he was great, but not when we needed him most. Not in that 05 Super Bowl, and not in all those NFC Championship games that they lost.
Yeah. Well, we can't wrap up without mentioning the Wing Bowl. This was, again, goes back to what we were talking about earlier. If we tried to put something like that together now, we'd be looked at with 3 heads and wouldn't get off the ground. Just that's how it is, you know, with the times have changed and all.
Right.
But I loved the story of Mayor Rendell, and I didn't notice for around, what was it, year 5, year 6, year 7, somewhere in that time period, helped you get the spectrum to do this. Could you, and now obviously you moved to the Wells Fargo Center, where I attended a few times, my junior and senior year of high school. I didn't drink through high school. I wasn't one of those kids. Waited till I was 21 and all, and I stick with the whiskey. But it's funny. It's funny, Angelo. Well, doing this, I have to drink the whiskey too. But, you know, the funny part would be that 2 years I attended during my junior and senior year, I would go late to class or to school, which obviously my parents were like, go, whatever, you know, it's cool. It's part of, that's a whole nother story. But I would come in because you know how the parking lots and all were, bonfires and people, you know, just the chaos of everything. I'd show up at 3rd period algebra class and they go, you smell like you were by a bonfire.
Mm.
Well, I was, you know, like, you know, there was no denying it. Like, what the hell were you doing before you came? I said, I may have been at the Wing Bowl, but all right, whatever.
Wow. That's a lot of people reach puberty at our event. It was an annual event we did for 26 years, chicken wing eating contest on the Friday before every Super Bowl. The idea came from Al Morgani, who said, we're never going to actually have the Eagles at the Super Bowl. Why don't we have our own little event? The first year was held in a hotel lobby at the Wyndham Franklin Plaza. 200 people showed up. We didn't think 50 would. And then it just kept growing. I get to see the governor / Mayor Rendell once a month or so. We have a lunch with a whole bunch of people, and he will tell you that although he was the one that took it from, you know, the Electric Factory, which was a concert venue, 3,500 seats, to the Spectrum, 18,000 seats, because he thought it was really starting to become the next Mummers Parade. He soon regretted ever giving us that opportunity because
I can't see why.
It got tackier. But it didn't really get tacky where the girls started walking around with very little clothes on and stuff until, let's say, the last 7 or 8 years when it got kind of tacky. So by the end of it, when the Eagles won the Super Bowl and we found a way out, right, I was happy. I fought to keep it for one last year, but I was happy that we were ending it because I realized, like you said before, politically incorrect, right? So I kind of ended it with a bad taste in my mouth. Then a strange thing happened. After I retired, like not even a month after, these two guys came to me, Pat Taggart and Frank Petka, and they said, we would like to do a documentary on the history of the wing ball, 26 years. Would you want to participate in it? And I said, not only would I'll do everything I can to help you, I would like to come to terms with it myself. And they came up with the most fantastic documentary that truly shows you the good, the bad, and the ugly of the 26 years. It's called No One Died, and it was featured at the Philadelphia Film Festival a couple of months ago, and it won one of the major prizes. It's brilliant. And I honestly believe if it can get to a major streamer like a Netflix or an Amazon, and they're trying to sell that there, this will not only redefine how people see the event, there will also probably be an outcry to bring it back, though clearly not the way it ended, because it just. But the thing about it was, here's the simple beauty of the wing ball. It took people that listened to our shows, where all we did was talk about star players and all, and it placed them in an arena with 20,000 people there every year. And some of these guys got to be a hero for an hour or a day, or they'd be on the newspaper the next day. They'd be on the cover of the Daily News the next day. And it took guys that never could get that kind of acclaim and just gave them a tiny taste of what it would be like if they were a hero too. And I think that I lost that along the way. So now I look back on it with pride and I go, you know what? Not only was it a fantastic radio promotion, for its time, it was a phenomenal thing in the culture of Philadelphia. I really have a great feeling about it now. And I hope you get to see it because you went to a few. You might see yourself.
I would love to see it. I heard about it, but I was trying to find if it was streaming somewhere, but I couldn't find it.
Yet.
So
Not out yet. See, the whole thing is it's fantastic, but they need to sell it because they put a lot of money into making it. And they've got video in that in there. Some of the brawls that went on in those stands. Jonathan, I didn't know that was going on until I watched the documentary. There was some amazing fights and the drunkenness and the craziness. And you said the bonfires outside. And the year that the Eagles went to the Super Bowl but didn't win, 2005, they smashed windows to try to get into the Spectrum and the insanity of that. And all these people like El Wingador and Big Rig and these guys that won and became famous. It's an amazing experience. It's like 90 minutes and it's spectacular. I can't tell you how great it is, how proud I am of those guys for making me love it again. And the thing about it is, the originator of the idea, Al Morgani, has not yet seen it. And I can't wait for him to see it because he's not an emotional man. But if anything ever gets him,
it will be this.
No One Died. The story of wing ball. I think it'll get him. It's a great thing. And it's, I've never been happy about anything. It's a beautiful project. That and the book, I've been very happy in retirement, just being a part of those two projects.
Well, as we wrap, the book is loud. How a shy nerd came to Philadelphia and turned up the volume in the most passionate sports city in America. Angelo Cataldi, thank you so much for the time.
It was my pleasure, Jonathan. Thank you for having me.
Hey there, Friday fans. We know how much you enjoy the movies. Enjoy grabbing your Friday merchandise and interacting with the Friday family, whether it be at conventions or during our particular watch-alongs. Well, when you're looking to get yourself masks, why not check out our friends over at Camp Blood Customs out of New York State and order your specific custom mask from any of the films. All orders are made specifically. Your needs and wants are. Make sure you find Camp Blood Customs on Facebook, Instagram, and all over social media and order yours today.
Hi, this is Vince Vitale from the movie Invincible, and you're listening to Crazy Train Radio. It's where you really want to get the real story, the Invincible story.